Leslie Cheung was more than a superstar. He was a cultural icon whose voice, style, and courage shaped an entire generation across Asia. From his meteoric rise in the Cantopop scene to groundbreaking roles in cinema, Leslie captivated millions with his talent and quiet defiance. But behind the fame, he was fighting a painful, invisible battle. This is the full story of his life, his impact, and the silent struggle that led to his tragic end. Stay with us as we uncover the brilliance and heartbreak of Leslie Cheung. Subscribe now for more real stories that deserve to be remembered. Leslie Cheung was born on September 12, 1956, in Kowloon, Hong Kong. His father was a successful tailor who made suits for Hollywood stars like Marlon Brando, which meant Leslie grew up surrounded by signs of wealth and fame. But despite the privilege, his childhood was far from happy. His parents' marriage was unstable, and Leslie often felt lonely. He was the youngest of 10 children, and many of his siblings were much older, with a distant father and a mother who suffered emotionally from the turbulent marriage. Leslie found comfort in music and movies, dreaming of a world where he could feel seen and understood. When he was a teenager, his parents sent him to England to study. At first, he lived in Norwich, then later moved to Leeds to attend university. Being overseas gave him space to grow, but also left him more isolated. He didn't finish his studies, and in the mid-1970s, he returned to Hong Kong, unsure of what he wanted to do with his life. He worked a few odd jobs, including selling handbags, and even worked as a bartender. But everything changed in 1977 when he entered the Asian Music Contest, a televised singing competition. Although he didn't win, the exposure was enough to get him noticed. He was charming, stylish, and had a soft yet powerful voice that stood out. After that, Leslie started releasing music, but his early songs didn't gain much traction. In fact, his first few records flopped, and he was even booed at one of his live performances. Still, he didn't give up. He kept performing, learning, and improving. Around the same time, he also started acting in TV dramas with TVB, the biggest broadcasting company in Hong Kong. These shows helped raise his profile, and soon he was being cast in bigger roles. Though his music career struggled at first, his acting started to take off. By the early 1980s, Leslie was slowly becoming a household name. The turning point came in 1983 with the release of his album, Wind Blows On. The album included hit tracks that were emotional and melodic, resonating with the younger generation in Hong Kong. His popularity exploded, and he became one of the pioneers of what would later be called the Cantopop movement. Cantopop, or Cantonese pop music, was more than just entertainment. It was part of the cultural identity of Hong Kong youth, and Leslie was at the heart of it. His songs were full of passion, longing, and poetic lyrics, and fans loved the vulnerability he brought to each performance. As his music career finally bloomed, his acting also reached new heights. In 1982, he starred in the film Nomad, which drew attention for its bold storytelling and stylish direction. Leslie played a disaffected youth struggling to find meaning in a world that felt aimless and cold. His performance was raw and magnetic, earning praise from critics and viewers alike. The movie captured the restless spirit of Hong Kong's younger generation, and Leslie became their symbol. He wasn't just a singer or actor anymore. He was an icon. His role in the 1986 blockbuster A Better Tomorrow, directed by John Woo, took his stardom to a whole new level. The film, which also starred Chow Yun-fat and T. Leung, became a defining piece of Hong Kong cinema. Leslie played Kit, a passionate young police officer torn between justice and family loyalty. The film was packed with action, emotion, and drama, and it was a massive hit across Asia. Audiences couldn't get enough of Leslie's layered performance, and the movie's success made him an even bigger star. By the mid-1980s, Leslie Cheung was everywhere. He sold out stadium concerts, topped music charts, and was featured in some of the biggest films of the decade. He had that rare ability to switch between roles. One moment, a gentle balladeer singing about lost love, and the next, a powerful screen presence commanding attention in dramatic scenes. His fashion sense also drew attention. Whether he wore tailored suits, bold colors, or delicate fabrics, he had a unique style that made him stand out. He wasn't afraid to push boundaries, and that made fans love him even more. Despite all the success, Leslie remained humble and soft-spoken in interviews. He often credited his fans for his rise, and was known to treat his crew and staff with respect. But beneath his calm and polished image, those who worked closely with him noticed a quiet sadness. He could be withdrawn at times, lost in thought, or unusually emotional after certain performances. Still, very few people suspected just how deeply he was struggling inside. In 1985, at the height of his fame, Leslie announced that he would retire from music. He felt burned out and wanted to focus on acting. The decision shocked fans, but they respected his choice. He held a farewell concert that year, which drew massive crowds and became one of the most memorable live events in Hong Kong music history. For many fans, it felt like the end of an era. But Leslie was just shifting gears. He wasn't going away, he was evolving. As the 1980s came to a close, Leslie Cheung had already become one of the most beloved entertainers in Asia. His voice had defined a generation, his acting had earned critical acclaim, and his presence, on stage, on screen, and in public, had become a cultural landmark. People loved him not only because he was talented, but because he was real. In a world full of carefully polished celebrity personas, Leslie showed something different: vulnerability, elegance, and quiet rebellion. He had carved out a place for himself in a fiercely competitive industry, and the journey was just getting started. In the late 1980s, Leslie Cheung entered a new phase in his life and career. Although he had stepped back from the music scene, his fame didn't fade. Instead, it took on new meaning as he embraced more ambitious acting projects. This was when he collaborated with some of Hong Kong's most influential directors, including Kar-wai, Stanley Kwan, and Chen Kaige. These filmmakers weren't just looking for a star. They needed someone who could bring emotional complexity to characters torn between duty, love, and identity. Leslie was the perfect choice. His eyes carried quiet pain. His gestures spoke louder than words. And on camera, he had an intensity that drew audiences in and never let go. In 1990, he starred in Days of Being Wild, the first of several collaborations with Kar-wai. The movie didn't follow a typical plot. Instead, it focused on the internal turmoil of its characters. And Leslie played Yuddy, a handsome drifter searching for his real mother, while breaking the hearts of everyone around him. The performance was subtle but powerful. He delivered every scene with quiet anguish, never overacting, but letting the sadness speak through his silences. The film didn't do well commercially at first, but it grew into a classic. Critics and fans later praised it for its beauty, mood, and emotional depth, calling it a masterpiece of modern Hong Kong cinema. One of Leslie's most iconic roles came in 1993 when he played Cheung in Farewell My Concubine, directed by Chen Kaige. The film was a sweeping historical epic set against the backdrop of war and revolution in China. Leslie's character was a Peking opera performer, trained from childhood to play female roles, and the story followed his lifelong relationship with another male performer, played by Zhang Fengyi. The role demanded physical and emotional transformation, and Leslie gave it everything. He trained in traditional opera techniques, changed his voice, adjusted his movements, and inhabited the role so fully that many viewers forgot they were watching a performance. The character's heartbreak, confusion, and unfulfilled love were portrayed with devastating honesty. Farewell, My Concubine won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival and received international acclaim. It introduced Leslie to a global audience and showed the world that he was more than just a pop star. He was an actor of the highest caliber. But as his international fame grew, so did the pressure. The film touched on themes that were controversial at the time, especially in Asia. Playing a character who was both gender fluid and emotionally vulnerable led to gossip and questions about Leslie's real-life identity. He had never publicly come out, but people speculated constantly. Reporters asked invasive questions. Tabloids ran stories full of rumors. Yet, through it all, Leslie remained composed. He didn't lash out or try to hide who he was. Instead, he focused on his work and let his art speak for itself. By the mid-1990s, Leslie slowly returned to music. He released several albums that were more personal and reflective than his earlier work. The lyrics explored themes of love, loneliness, and self-acceptance. His fans embraced this new chapter, seeing a deeper, more mature artist in every song. In 1995, he launched the Passion Tour, a global concert series that became legendary. Leslie didn't just sing, he performed with emotion, style, and theatrical flair. He wore bold costumes, danced with elegance, and used the stage to tell stories. At a time when many male performers played it safe, Leslie took risks. He wore sheer fabrics, painted his nails, and occasionally dressed in ways that blurred traditional gender lines. It wasn't just fashion. It was a quiet act of defiance in a society that still judged people harshly for being different. In 1997, during an interview, Leslie openly acknowledged his relationship with Daffy Tong, a man he had been with for many years. While he didn't label himself, he made it clear that Daffy was the love of his life. The moment was historic. Few male celebrities in Asia had ever been so open about a same-sex relationship. While some in the media tried to sensationalize it, most fans responded with overwhelming support. To many people across Asia, Leslie became more than an entertainer. He became a symbol of courage. He didn't try to be a spokesperson. He didn't wave flags or make speeches. But by being true to himself, he inspired countless others who were hiding or afraid to be seen. Despite his brave face, those close to Leslie noticed that he was struggling. The fame, the scrutiny, the demands, it all took a toll. He began showing signs of depression, though at the time, few people understood what that meant. Mental health wasn't widely discussed, especially among men in the public eye. There was a cultural expectation to be strong, silent, and emotionally controlled. Leslie tried to meet those expectations, but inside, he was breaking. He began canceling interviews, withdrawing from friends, and spending more time alone. He was still performing and acting, still smiling for fans and cameras, but something was clearly changing. In 2000, he starred in Double Tap, a psychological thriller where he played a marksman with an obsession for perfection and control. The film was dark, disturbing, and haunting. Leslie's performance was chilling, and some critics later pointed out that it reflected his own inner demons. A year later, he played a similar role in Inner Senses, a horror film about a man haunted by ghosts and memories. Once again, his character's journey mirrored his own descent into mental anguish. Watching those films now, many people say Leslie was leaving clues, trying to express the pain he couldn't say out loud. Through all of this, Leslie kept working. He kept smiling in public, kept giving beautiful performances, and kept trying to hold on. But the darkness was growing. Even with the love of his partner, the admiration of millions, and a legacy most artists only dream of, Leslie was fighting a battle no one else could fully see. The applause was loud, but the silence afterward was unbearable. And slowly, that silence began to consume him. By 2002, Leslie Cheung was still widely adored, still invited to film premieres, award shows, and elite parties. But behind all the glamour, his inner world had grown darker and harder to manage. He had been battling severe clinical depression, and although he had sought medical treatment, the illness refused to let go. Friends and colleagues noticed how he had changed. His weight fluctuated, his energy dropped. His once bright eyes often looked tired or unfocused. But Leslie didn't want pity. He didn't want people to worry. So he kept smiling in public, delivering his lines, finishing his concerts, and pretending everything was fine. That year, he starred in Inner Senses, a horror film that would become infamous in hindsight. The movie told the story of a psychologist who helps a young woman haunted by ghosts, only to later suffer his own terrifying visions. The character, played by Leslie, slowly loses his grip on reality. The film was well received, but for many, watching it later felt almost unbearable. Scenes where Leslie's character talks about suicide or sinks into despair seemed too close to his real life. It was as if he was rehearsing his own fate. Even though he was working and appearing at events, those closest to him said he often seemed emotionally distant. He would cancel appointments at the last minute or disappear for days without explanation. During filming and public appearances, he was professional, but once the cameras stopped, the mask would drop. He spoke to a few trusted people about how he felt, but not in detail. Like many people with depression, he didn't want to be a burden. In interviews from that period, his voice would sometimes tremble when he mentioned loneliness or the pain of being misunderstood, but he always redirected the conversation with a joke or a soft smile. To most fans, he still seemed like the same beautiful, untouchable star they had always loved. Throughout early 2003, Leslie appeared at a few public events, including charity functions and small promotional spots. He smiled politely, posed for photos, but his energy was low. He told some friends that he was working on a new film project, and he even mentioned ideas for another concert tour. But there was something final in his tone. One friend later recalled that Leslie had started giving away personal items like designer clothes and jewelry without explanation. It didn't feel like generosity, it felt like closure. On April 1st, 2003, everything changed. That morning, Leslie checked into the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in central Hong Kong. He was wearing black and looked quiet, but calm. Staff said he was polite and didn't seem distressed. He took a suite on one of the higher floors and spent several hours alone. Around 6:40 p.m., he jumped from the 24th floor of the hotel. The news spread instantly, first by word of mouth, then by television and radio. For many people, it didn't seem real. Some thought it was a prank, a cruel April Fool's Day hoax, but it wasn't. Leslie Cheung was dead at 46. Authorities later found a note in his room. In it, Leslie said he had been suffering from depression for a long time and had tried his best to fight it. He apologized to his loved ones and said he hoped people would understand that it was an illness, not a decision made in a moment of weakness. The letter was short but heartbreaking. It confirmed what many had suspected but never fully understood. Leslie had been hurting for years, and no amount of fame, love, or success could quiet the storm inside him. The city of Hong Kong was stunned. Fans gathered outside the hotel and lit candles, left flowers, and held silent vigils. Across Asia, celebrities and public figures expressed shock and sorrow. Radio stations played his songs on loop. TV stations ran marathons of his films. On the day of his funeral, thousands lined the streets, many of them crying openly, holding signs and singing his music. Some wore black. Others wore white, a traditional color of mourning. The grief was overwhelming and genuine. But something else happened too. Leslie's death forced a conversation that Hong Kong had avoided for too long. People began to talk openly about depression, about mental illness, about the silent pain that can live behind a perfect face. His fans, especially those from the LGBTQ community, shared how much he had meant to them, not just as a star, but as someone who dared to be honest, to be different, to be vulnerable in a world that demanded strength. His courage in life and the tragedy of his death created space for empathy. In the years that followed, Leslie Cheung's legacy only grew. His music still plays on radio stations. His films are studied in cinema classes. Concert tributes are held in his honor, where fans of all ages gather to remember his voice, his elegance, his soul. He is remembered not just as a pop icon or a movie star, but as a person, flawed, brilliant, loving, haunted. People still visit his grave, still leave notes thanking him for being a light in their lives, even if his own light was dimmed too soon. More than 2 decades have passed, but the pain of losing him has never fully faded. Leslie Cheung's story is not just about fame or tragedy. It is about the quiet strength it takes to keep going when your heart is breaking. It is about how art can heal, even as it hurts. And it is a reminder that behind the most dazzling smile, there might be someone silently screaming for help. Leslie gave the world everything he had: his beauty, his talent, his truth. In return, all he ever wanted was to be loved and understood. And even now, he still is. Leslie Cheung's life was filled with beauty, talent, and truth, but also sorrow too deep for many to see. His courage to be himself in a conservative world made him a trailblazer, not just in art, but in identity. Though his life ended too soon, his voice still echoes, and his legacy continues to inspire. He wasn't just a star, he was a soul who tried to shine through the darkness. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe for more true stories that celebrate extraordinary lives and untold pain behind the spotlight.